Welcome to the MIT IT Innovation Program podcast. This is a repository of insights by thought leaders and practitioners of innovation where they speak about their views, insights, and experiences. Come join us.
Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Emerging Technologies and Innovations. My name is Priya Dhawan and I contribute as the Head of Collaborations, Branding and Outreach to the MIT ID Innovation Program. This is our 7th webinar since lockdown started and I'm grateful to be amongst you all hosting this informational session today. A very warm welcome to our guest speaker, Mr. Nikhil Malhotra, a futurist and an innovator at heart. Nikhil is the Global Head of Innovation and creator of Makers Lab, a unique incubator space within Tech Mahindra with over 20 years of experience. He holds a master's degree in computing with specialization in distributed computing from Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology, Melbourne. He has been a researcher all his life and is now leading the growth of AI, machine learning, robotics, and quantum research within Tech Mahindra. Nikhil's area of personal research has been how quantum computing and neuroscience has inspired the growth of AI and how the two fields can merge in the future. He has also designed a robo in his lab as a personal assistant. The current bets he has undertaken is how ethical is AI. He's building an autonomous level 2 vehicle in India and how quantum can give us better cancer drugs. This is over and above the current set of innovations he and his team have undertaken in the COVID-19 era. So before we proceed to listen to Nikhil, I have a few updates to share about the session and the MIT ID Innovation Program webinar platform. Firstly, today's webinar will have the speaker share his insights for the first half hour, followed by questions in the latter half hour. Next, we'd love to hear from you during today's webinar. If you have a question for our speaker, please feel free to share it via the chat mode once you set it to everyone. If we don't get to your question during today's webinar, we will surely follow it up offline. This webinar will be available after the session on our various social channels, and future webinars will be accessible through the same link that you're using right now. We'd like to encourage you to share today's webinar and its learnings with your social networks. This curated series of innovations will feature a variety of industry thought leaders, speakers like Mr. Nikhil Malhotra, who are a part of the MIT ID innovation ecosystem. For those who are joining us for the first time today, I'd like to inform you that MIT stands for the 4-decade-old Maharashtra Institute of Technology. ID stands for MIT's 15-year-old Institute of Design. The one-year program on innovation is the latest offering of MIT ID, which aims to create a new breed of comprehensive innovators, informed by design thinking, influenced by future technologies and trends, and inspired to make their own mark in the global political, social, economic, and technological scenario. So warm welcome once again, Nikhil. Over to you.
Hey, thank you so much, Priya. And I think I'll quickly start off by wishing everybody a very good evening and hoping that everybody's safe at home, and we've got to stay back at home as well. I also thank MIT ID program, Priya, and people working with her to ensure that this is a kind of a unique platform which we can probably use digital technologies to reach out to more people. So what I would do for the next half an hour is cut down my video and share some slides. More than welcome to essentially take up your questions of what we are doing. But I think the post-COVID era or within the COVID era has posed certain quintessential questions to us. From an IT background, but also from a philosophical as well as a humane background of what we want to do. How do we want to treat this planet, and what are some of the next steps that we want to take in? There would be smaller innovations being created by people back at home, like masks, etc. But then there would be larger innovations coming in for the sector in the growing time. So I wanted to start off with a simple slide which says, what are we doing to fight the war against COVID through innovation, which is today and tomorrow? And of course, this is the coronavirus. But before I go in, I'll just give you a brief background of what I do. It's been 21 years for me in the industry. I started off with IBM as a researcher, and some of the initial Watson pieces were also written by me along with the team. And then joined Tech Mahindra way back in 2007 and have been with Tech Mahindra for 13 long years now. Spent quite a bit of time in US, was working as senior technical architect, dealing with certain accounts in US. But I think 2014 was that year that asked me or that prompted me to come back to India for two simple reasons. Number one, of course, there was personal reason. I had a little one who was born at that time, but I also wanted to do more for the country, number one. And number two, the way the country was shaping up under our current Prime Minister, it was very heartening to see that we were, the whole paraphernalia of scopes were opening up. So I came back to India and I almost had an epiphany to probably start something of my own. But my management at Tech Mahindra said that we would give you some area and some space for you to essentially work across. So, that was also the starting point of what this small little makers lab happened to be. If you come down to our campus in Tech Mahindra, the Makers Lab essentially sits in one corner, and it's a complete building. It's one floor building. And the reason for making Makers Lab or this space for R&D was essentially two ways. Number one, we, as an IT person and as looking at technology, I thought that we had stopped asking quintessential questions of why. We were essentially asking questions of what and how, and we continue to do that. And the reason for that is very simple. I think we are the solution bowl of the world. So anywhere across the world, if there's a technological problem, we Indians would solve it in the first go. But somewhere or the other, the research component that I felt was, that needed to be pushed was very missing in technology terms. And as a result of that, we started the research and development incubator in Tech Mahindra. This simple slide that comes in front of you essentially showcases what our mission and vision has been. And our mission and vision is a little grand, but it is also at a smaller scale. We started off with a very, very simple vision. And the vision was, how do you connect with people and how do you simplify lives by creating experiences? The mission is, how do you build smart machines of the future? I think in today's world, you have heard people say a lot of things around AI. You've seen people say a lot of things around machine learning. I think those have become talks of the town. But while we apply AI and machine learning, we have actually stopped thinking about what is the primal intelligence. And really, if we are building a machine that we claim to be intelligent, does it really understand intelligence in itself? So this was our background in starting off our research in neuroscience, in our research in understanding the primal level of intelligence that human beings have. So our approach towards solving some of these problems and our research is essentially how humans think and how can we essentially put in a small part of it into machines and think and make them think better. And why do we want to do that? I do not want to create another sentient being. As opposed to all the Hollywood and Bollywood flicks that show that robots would take over the world, that is not our intention. But the intention is that whatever these machines really do, they really do it well, and they understand the context in which they're working. And I think that has been our prime mission around it. But having set the vision and mission, we did not know how do we want to go about. And we were very, very naive back in 2014. So one day we were having tea outside our campus, and 2 or 3 of us, which we started this Makers Lab, we said, let's build bike that stands on its own. Now, imagine Tech Mahindra is a telecom provider, is a service system integrator, is an IT services. We are no longer connected, or we no way connected to any bike making systems. But the only reason why we wanted to make a bike on its own, or which would stand on its own, was basically use components of robotics and IoT. So we essentially got a small little bike. We didn't have the full bike, but we got a bicycle from our homes. And we essentially started unscrambling and scrambling it and fitting it with sensors, etc. Actually, for the first 3 months, nothing happened. And it was an utter failure. You can see over here, there is a team that is basically putting up the bike. And you can also see a picture of the bike hanging on our walls. Because after 3 months, we were so frustrated with our own efforts. And we also got the news that Boston Dynamics has already built these self-balancing bikes or these self-balancing robots, that we essentially wanted to leave this away. So the idea behind all of this was, can we objectify technology? And can we really look at some of the pieces of technology before we go into it? So essentially our place, or the first experiment that we started in the first 3 months, was an utter failure. And that failure is reflected it's a marketing terminology that we can say that this was the most successful failure. But I would like to count it that this was more of a feedback principle. This feedback taught us that we've got to objectify every single piece that we do. And if you happen to be in Pune and you happen to be in Makers Lab, you would see this bike hanging, albeit it's now colored and it's basically much more brighter. And we showcase it in our walls, which is a constant reminder to us saying that technology pieces have to be built on our own, or whatever we do has to have some impact to the human life as well. Well, since Priya talked about neuroscience, since Priya talked about AI, I just want to take each one of you, and most of you would essentially know it. I want to take you back to about 1939. World War II is raging on, and German ships are blasting the Allies, which is basically English ships. And, Germans are putting them out of supplies. Supplies cannot reach the lands because these ships are being bombarded at every second corner. And you know what is the reason behind it? Germans have always used a code, which you would have seen in some movies like Imitation Game, called the Enigma. The code Enigma had about 128 patterns, and that Enigma code was sent and was changed every single day, every 24 hours. And in order to break that code within 24 hours, you would require 150,000 people all across the globe working 24/7 to break it. So it was practically impossible. So the Allies were losing this battle. And in comes a young graduate into Bletchley Park. His name is Alan Turing. And he says, I can break this code, but I would need a machine to break it. I think that point is just the starting point of how AI and artificial intelligence came into being. So Turing built a big system of pulleys and weights. He had some machines which could crank up, and these machines would essentially crank up every day that single code that used to come or used to be intercepted by the English. And a decryption of that code was essentially given. The Allies did win the war at the end of the day, and Turing was considered as the father of artificial intelligence. But Turing also gave a very simple test, which has probably become a bedrock for all of us in artificial intelligence. And this test is very commonly and popularly known as Turing test. Now, what you're seeing on the screen is an example of a Turing test, which says that there's a human questioner in the middle, the man, and there's a computer on the left-hand side, which he cannot see, across a wall, and there's another interviewer or respondent on the right-hand side. This human questioner keeps asking questions to both the computer as well as the human. And if he cannot decide whether he's talking to a human being or a machine, then the machine has supposedly passed this test. And this test is called Turing test. All across the world, from the last 50 to 60 years, all AI machine learning mechanisms have been trying to break this Turing test or trying to up the ante over here. We are basically saying that a machine is said to be AI compliant or machine learning compliant when the machine essentially breaks the Turing test or follows the Turing test in some way or the other. But when I got into this field way back in 2004, 2005, one question always prompted me to question the very basics of the test. And the very basics of the test was that Turing essentially made a test which makes some machine behave as if it is intelligent, even though it does not have intelligence. And what I mean by that is very simple, that instead of that computer respondent, if I actually place another human being over there, and this time the person who's asking the questions is asking in Chinese, the guy on the right-hand side or the girl on the right-hand side knows Chinese, and the person who's sitting on the left-hand side does not know Chinese, but we've given them some farra, chit, etc. that we call it. This person would still not be able to decipher that he's talking to the guy who knows Chinese or not. In a way, I can break Turing test. And the reason for that is Turing's assumption was if a machine can mimic intelligence, it is deemed intelligent. And that is the bedrock of what we do as research in Makers Lab, where we want to come out with algorithms and stuff. I am not going into details of what we have found out from a neuroscientific principle. But but very simply, what we have understood is this is your human brain. This is that small little piece that sits within your cranium, and it's about 1.1 kilos. And if you crinkle it up, it'll essentially be just like a sheet of paper. And this cortex by default this is called the neocortex, cortex meaning brain or the sector of the brain that is available. This cortex has only got one algorithm in your body. All right. And how do we prove that this is one algorithm? And this is an experiment that scientists did with rats and mice, where what they did was the nerve that goes from the body's sensory organs, which is like your arms, your hands, your skin, is connected to one portion inside the brain. So they essentially cut down that portion and they connected the eye, which is the iris, to that section. Remember, that section was at one point in time of the brain understanding touch. But within 2 months, that section essentially behaves and starts seeing as well. So the eye starts responding very, very rightly in the right essence of the process of seeing or sight, which essentially means that the algorithm in that part of the cortex really changes itself and starts seeing now. And they did another experiment where the pinna or the earlobe was actually cut out, or the nerve from there was cut out, and it was again planted towards an eye. And that region again started seeing. Now, this is so interesting because the ear has a logarithmic response, whereas the eye has a very, very linear response of how you see vision, which is your which is the monoclear vision that you see. So this really said scientists that the algorithm that runs in our brain is only one. There is less mathematics, but what this algorithm really does inside the brain is that it takes in a lot of information from across the world and then creates a model of the world itself. So what you are seeing in front of you every day is the model of the world that you have created. And that model of the world keeps on shifting and you keep creating memory out of it. And this memory essentially is the process of living and what we consider in very biological terms as the human essence. So what you are, each one of you is independent. Each one of you is a different soul and an individual. And your individuality really depends upon all of these experiences that are hidden inside your cortex, which is essentially giving you that essence of life. So that was a good finding for us as Cortex. But what did we want to do? And the reason why we want to do it, as I mentioned earlier, that we are not here to create sentient beings. We are here to help machines look better or work better. And I have some examples over here where essentially you see on the left-hand side, bottom left-hand side, a hazy sector. But all of us as human beings can really figure out that there's a train coming up and there's a track, and it's suppose foggy or smoggy conditions where this train's traveling. Most of the machines have a problem understanding what these three lights are because this kind of a condition, which is the fringe condition, doesn't appear to machines that much. Similarly, most of us will know, even though we don't know the person behind this frame, but we know that there's a human face and there's a human sitting and we've blurred some portions of the brain. Machines have a huge problem in understanding this facet. What you see over here, we all know it. It's a cat with its head inside a sandal. If you give it to some of the machines that have been doing work on imagery and image processing, my machines, at least 85% of the times, have said this is a polar bear. And the reason for that is they cannot see cat whiskers. They cannot see the cat ears. All they can see is a tail and a big body, which is essentially coming up out of a sandal. So the machines are not able to realize what kind of an animal it is. But look at the human cognition and the sense. Within 5 seconds, you would have realized this image and you would have known what is going on. Not just you. If I would have given it to my kids who are about 6 years and one is about 2 years, he would have probably realized it, saying that this is a cat over there. This is another example where we have given a cut chair and that cut chair is hanging against a wall. About 80 to 85% of the machines, when trained initially, called it as a violin because it appears as a string of violin. It doesn't appear as a chair. Now, these are some examples where we see machines behaving not right or machines not really finding out the truth, where us humans can really do it or figure out. And that has been really the research, which I don't want to go into detail over here, but this is what we are essentially doing from a neuroscientific and an AI principle. We also ensure that we do not leave humanity behind. And we keep thinking around these things. And one of these things was when I looked at, when you go into planes and you say there's always an announcement saying that, for people who do not have a good sight, they can probably take a Braille system. And one of these days, about 2 years back, I was traveling in a plane. I actually asked the air hostess to give me the Braille. Her first reaction was of shock and surprise because she could see that I can see well. But the other reaction was, why does this guy really want a Braille? So I took the Braille and I actually opened it up on my own seat and I closed my eyes and started looking at how the Braille mechanism was built. it was so difficult for me, even though I know what Braille is, to understand what's going on. And it needs years and years and years of practice for people who do not have sight or who are not blessed with good eyesight to essentially go through Braille. So I went back and I asked my team to do a little bit of research, and we found out that 60% of the Indian population, or even the world's population, essentially gets blinded after birth. It's not a congenital disease. And, when you get blinded because of certain reasons of, in the body as glucose or sugar level rose up, or because of some injury, you essentially have to learn this mechanism of Braille again and again. And that can be a great hindrance for folks to essentially go through this training mechanism. So we went back to the boards and we essentially made a new system. Well, my team said we should call by your name. It's called Nix Octave. But what we've managed to do is we've managed to convert the entire Braille structure into very, very simple logical octave. And the reason why we call it as octave is because you can see in Braille, there are 2 vertical lines. In octave, we've given 3 vertical lines. And you can actually draw the entire figure onto an octave very, very simply. So if your keyboards are changed, if the phones are changed to this sector, we would not really need any training for people to get into Braille. We can simply essentially use this mechanism of octave to do that. It's essentially patent pending, but we are looking at research with some of our counterparts and some of the institutes that we work with. So this is basically a system for visually challenged. Makers Lab is a place where we have opened up almost everything to everyone to make sure that they work together. This is an example of a gentleman called Mr. Satish Khetkar. Satish, up till last year, was an Uber driver. And Satish used to travel with me or carry me around from Pune to Mumbai to catch my international flights. And one of these days, Satish, and he was always very good, quiet, respectful, made sure that he was, he made sure that my needs were met. And we did not have that kind of a chat that often. But one of these days, he started chatting because he overheard me on the phone by saying some research that we were doing. And he said he wanted to join me and he wanted to essentially do something of his own. So the first thing that I responded back to Satish was, okay, do you know Python? And he says, nahi sir, Python to pata nahi. So I said, if you can learn Python, it'll be great. So within 2 months down the line, the next time when I sat in Satish's chair or Satish's, system or in his car, Satish had a laptop in his hand and he was showing me Python codes. And those Python codes have landed Satish into Makers Lab. And on his own volition, remember Satish has no background of technology. And Satish on his own volition has actually now learned C, C++, Python, is designing and has made drones out of it. So, and is now a permanent associate within the Makers Lab. So when somebody says that we need skills today, I normally tell them that we only need the will and passion. If we have the will, the skills would come up. There's another gentleman that I want to recognize over here, and this gentleman is also in this. He's there with me, and he's actually listening to me. And I hope that this particular representation does not put his head into thin air. But Jay has always been a different kind of a personality. And Jay met me when I saw him in 3rd year of Symbiosis. And if you talk to Jay, Jay is not the usual kind of person who would talk and straight back to you. He would rather have his own mechanism to think about. But when given a task that I gave to Jay and I said, make me a game, Jay, this gentleman made a 300 screen role-playing game within 3 weeks, a feat which is not accomplished by some of the best game designers across the world. So what we looked at Jay was an individual who was very, very diverse from us. Neurodiverse, maybe very, very diverse, but also he had the ability, skill, and passion to do it. He did not have a channel, but Jay's channel, we found out, we are lucky to have found out Jay in Makers Lab. And Jay is there with us, so you can essentially ask questions of what his experience has been. Jay is now joining us as a permanent associate in Makers Lab, and Jay is there with us on this podcast as well. So what's our philosophy? What's Makers Lab philosophy? The first philosophy that we look at life is essentially design. And what we mean by design is, can a design be desirous, or whatever you make? Can it be efficient, and can it be very, very useful? And when you look at it, I can give you some hundreds of examples where these designs have changed. One of the prime examples I can give, which one of my friends stole from Mahindra, and he leads the innovation sector over there. And he said, boss, when we were designing this new Mahindra truck that, you know, the 407 part jo Tata ka hota hai, they were designing a truck. They had all sorts of designers come up with different solutions. They were designing trucks in this way. They were putting this sector, etc. One intelligent person amongst them said, boss, farmers se to pucho, what do they really want from a truck? So, you know, that was a kind of a light in the dark. These guys went to different farmers across the country. And you know what the farmers responded back? I don't care about the design, sir. Mujhe na haath rakhne ke liye ek jagah chahiye. So I just need a place to keep my hand, was the farmer's response. It is for that reason that Mahindra Trucks today has a door which has got a window, which only allows a driver to take his hand and put it over there. The second thing that these farmers wanted to do was they wanted a horn to honk close to their house or their in-laws' house to tell them that there is a matter of prestige that we are handling a truck. So all designs that you do sitting back at home were just flung out of the window, my friend said. And he said, we actually made a very, very practical design for a Mahindra truck, something that exudes confidence within that driver and something that adds value and is desirable to that specific person. Now, coming back to that, we in Mahindra and Tech Mahindra follow this philosophy. Number one is the philosophy of R, which essentially means values are non-visible part of any product that give you that unique experience. And this is a Melbourne tram or a Calcutta tram that you might take in. The component that is not visible to you but uniquely defines your experience is the driver's seat, where the driver sits. It has to be comfortable so that he can drive well. The other part is the functional part. Trams must run well, and they should cut out the noise factor, but they should also be speedier the way they do. So this is the value of a visible part of any product that you might give in. The E is essentially the part which says that it exudes confidence and it is basically design friendly. So it's retro, it's modern, it's got new technology, and these are things that we could do. But anything that you produce and you build in also needs to have a measure of memory attached to it. Now, if you ask people from Australia and you say, what is your experience of a tram? They would rather give you a figure like this. And this is an old tram of 1900s that was running in Australia. They still have this etched in their memory. Whenever we do research, whenever we produce products and IPs, we essentially ensure that this design element is taken care of. So that binds in the human value to the whole product, which is essentially machines. And that's our case where we are aligning machines and humans together. Now, what have been some of our credentials? These are more marketing terms, but I can tell you that we were the first ones to essentially do a video encryption using quantum mechanism. There is a big paper that we have written on quantum technologies and quantum computing, and we essentially did a quantum key encryption mechanism. We have our own IPs and frameworks like chatbots, which you can utilize. We are SoftBank partners for essentially their robotic systems, which allows us to give a lot more on robots and IoT. We drive augmented and virtual reality systems. We have gamers, professional gamers who work with us. And these professional gamers are gamifying not just the lives of us as human beings sitting and working in a corporate, but also for some college students where we essentially connected. And we also connect to research, top researchers across the world where we do neuroscience inspired AI. What has been our fight against COVID? When COVID started, we thought that we have to give back to the world as a fight mechanism from innovation. So some of the things that we are doing, and this is all open, you can utilize it. We first started with a chatbot. So if you go to entelio.techmahindra.com, which is our system, it's open to anyone. You will essentially see a chatbot that gives you information about COVID. It tells you about world's COVID status. It tells you Indian COVID centers. And this was started about a month back when the system was all under, when we are talking about you can go into lockdown, you can essentially go into these mechanisms. So we thought we can essentially give this world, in fact, our associates and our customers as well, something like this that they can utilize, something which is faster and doesn't require a lot of, installations, downloads, etc. The other thing that we thought was there is so many people who are huddled back in their homes, and they would, when you go through a lockdown, it's also about the next day. What would I do the next day? What would my approach be? So in that scenario, we essentially made two separate games. One was a crossword game. And again, this link is available. You can go in and watch it. It was a simple crossword game that gave users the ability to know about coronavirus. And then we made into a role-playing game where you can go through series of steps. You have some blood power. You can fight the virus, etc. All of this was done to attract the next generation, the millennials, the Z generation, as you call it, so that they don't get bored. And we continuously are adding now levels into the game. Of course, the game first ran only on PCs. It still runs on PCs, but we're now making it into a mobile game with 8 levels, which you can utilize and play, and you can give directions. Or in some cases where we are connected to a school as well in Bangalore called Glendale Academy, Hyderabad. There we have essentially also giving it to students, and we are saying students from 9th and 10th can actually help us redefine the structure of the game, maybe add their own components. So that was one fight that we did against COVID. The second fight, again, this paper is available on the net. We essentially wanted to understand how the protein structure really worked. And what you see on the screen is protein structures made by us. We essentially looked at the entire protein peptide chain, and we started comparing it with all the other protein peptide chains that were available for proteins in the protein data bank. And we found that there was a slight bit of a connection, or maybe a larger connection, that malarial peptide chains had with the coronavirus peptide chain. And at that very moment, there was also a talk of hydroxychloroquine, which is basically being used, along with it raises the pH value. So we thought that we were at the right level. And now we are also extending this research. And these are empirical facts that came out from our AI machine learning. But then we wanted to extend it further. So we are now extending it further with this. Now we are working with some of the top researchers in the field. One of this researcher is Dr. Uday Saxena, a very highly respected and a world-renowned scientist. He is the gentleman who essentially started a vaccine or made the compound for something called Lipitor. And that Lipitor is being used for a lot of purposes. Now, what we are trying to do, and this is a research which is actively on, which we plan to give something in the next 2 months, is we have identified 22 FDA drugs that can work on the protein. But can we figure out a therapeutic drug that can work faster as a ligand, as a GRAS agent, as a system that can nullify the protein itself as a virus? And why do we want to do that? It's very, 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 very simple. A vaccine would take 18 months to come in this market. We would get a drug out, or we are hoping that a drug can come out in less than half that time. We can probably take 6 months to get the drug out, 6 to 9 months. And that's our hope, that we can essentially help humanity during that value. So this was some of our vaccine or the drug research that we're doing. What are our bets post-COVID era? I think Priya has already stated this. These are the 3 bets that we are running across TechM and across research sectors, which we want to do. Number 1 is a platform called Road 2. And what Road really means is it's a retrofit option for autonomous driving. And all of us know that driving is more of an art than science in our country. But can we take that art and science and mix together and create some kind of a level 2 autonomy with our cars? But we don't want to bring in a car from the OEM itself that is being made by the OEM and created into a autonomous car. We want to give autonomous features as a retrofit. So you will be given a car, you can have a 2001 model or you can have a 2010 model. You can take some components, put them into a car, and the car becomes autonomous for level 2. Level 2 means that you would still require the driver to run the car, but it will have some autonomy feature attached to it. And we also want to make sure that this works into the Indian routine or the Indian system, where problems of finding edges, problems of people coming in all of a sudden, you have every species and maybe sometimes roads are not really right and you can't get edges of the roads. That's how we want to really get into it. The second challenge that we want to solve is the ethical AI system, and we've seen it all across the world. I've had my talks in World Economic Forum, and you can reach out and see those videos. But I think where AI, machine learning, and new technology is going to affect the kids the most. One of the examples that I can give you very openly and blatantly is there was a doll in Germany which was an internet toy. It was, that started speaking in a bad language to a little girl, and that was completely taken off the market in Germany. Now, when internet happens to be in toys, and when toys can talk and listen to you and talk to you, there is also a responsibility from the manufacturers as well as other companies to create ethics in those toys. And that's our second approach, where we want to look at every AI system and produce some kind of an ethical switch. Whether this switch contains about getting data from healthcare for people, whether this switch contains data about, you talking to somebody or talking to a machine, there has to be an ethical facet that is going in. And where are we getting these approaches from? We are looking at two sectors. One, of course, is the UN People's Charter, which tells us what ethical systems really mean. But I think we also need to go back to our Vedic systems. And we essentially found out a lot of these informations are available in Brahma Sutra and some of the other sutras and other books from other religions who have actually taught us about this. We've probably forgotten it. And we want to bring back those systems as empirical and numerical formulas into AI and into the modern system. And we are working with Vedic scientists. We are working with Vedantists who essentially come to our lab, who sit with us, who tell us that this is what Vedas really mean over here. And then we look at, okay, this might be a rule for putting up back into the ethical AI system. So that's our second bet. The third bet, I think, is what we have been doing with COVID. It just picked up because of the scenario in COVID, which is essentially using quantum computing and finding out protein folding, drug structures. The reason for that is you can now see a smallpox vaccine took 20 years before smallpox got eradicated. We are looking at a COVID-19 vaccine in 2 years or maybe 18 months, so as to say. The space at which the research is growing is only because of data analysis and AI compute powers that we can give in. And quantum plays a huge part over there. So that's our third big bet that we want to give in. But I just want to end it, since it's on the hour and we spent that time basically saying that this is your final takeaway. And this is my philosophy, personal philosophy, that I've carried forward within Tech Mahindra and Makers Lab. But this is your philosophy that you can take across as well whenever you deal with life. I think, one, we follow this simple principle of courage. And, when you essentially say courage, you have different connotations. You mean strength, you mean people who have power. For us, courage really means this. Number one, collaborate is the C part of it. So we cannot work in today's world unless we collaborate with a large ecosystem that we're working across. Objectify. As I mentioned, you've got to objectify almost every single thing. Objectify technology, objectify your work, objectify your relationships in order to understand what do they really mean and get a better understanding. The U really means you are the maker. And since we talk about Makers Lab, this is very, very particular about people who innovate and who make things, whether they make things in software or they make things in machines and mechanics. You are the maker of the destiny, so you has to be given into it. The R means rewiring of your psyche. The heart is an organ that continuously pumps blood 24/7 and is never tired, and it does it involuntarily. It's the brain that needs a lot of rewiring when you get into dumps. And I think that's where you need a rewiring of your psyche. This third piece of asking stupid questions is something that we follow very, very religiously in Makers Lab. You've got to ask a stupid or a perceivably stupid question. And you've got to have some eyebrows against you saying that, this was not good, or, are you that stupid? But what we have figured out is that if you keep asking questions like this, you tend to simplify the whole problem. It is okay to create a great system in technology world, which is very, very complex. It's really difficult to create a simple facet which works well and which helps people. And I think that's what asking stupid questions every day really helps us. The G is elevate your goals. And when I say elevate your goals, if you want to land on moon, your goal should be landing on Mars, so that whatever may happen, you still land on moon. And the E part is something that each one of us can do in today's times, is to empathize with your own self first. It's again the same thing which we call from flights and planes, where people say, please wear your mask before helping an infant or a baby. But the idea is, for an innovator, for a person who wants to build something new, there are a lot of potholes of disgust that come in. A lot of potholes where, your morale is really down. It is only when you empathize with your own ego first that you're able to take yourself out. So I would rather end this discussion and would be open to any questions by saying, this is the philosophy we have followed. More than happy to take your questions and see what we can do together. Thanks, Priya.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Nikhil. I'm truly lucky that I was able to visit Maker's Lab. And, this was just about before lockdown started. And I also happened to meet, of course, Satish in person as well. So it's all the more so much, relatable to all that you shared so far. Fantastic work. I also wanted to, have you speak a bit regarding your vision to enable machines to talk in local Indian dialect. Remember, you spoke about.
Yeah, and that's a thing that we're doing on the sides. I think one of the things that I want to really do is make sure that there are two challenges with India. I think, Indian ecosystem is essentially on the fringe. When I say the fringe, it's basically every use case applied to every other part of the world fails down when you apply it in India. It's because of the amount of fringe that we have. Now, that fringe also means the fringe in a language. We are linguistically and geographically very, very diverse. We have 1645 dialects and we have 23 mother tongues. So we took upon us a kind of mission saying that we will mix and match all of these languages together and we will produce one common layer. And that's our work on Sanskrit. So we've reached certain level where we have essentially used Sanskrit as a base layer and we're putting all the languages on top of it. All the northern languages, we feel that 13 languages work on Sanskrit and some of the other 10 work on Tamil as well. And we want to create that simple mechanism for a machine to talk to us. And that's our work and that's our research.
Sure. And where is your robo currently?
My robo is in Germany at the moment.
Okay. You want to delve more in terms of what is it doing in Germany right now?
So the robo was essentially built for two places. It's in two places. One of them is in New Zealand, where it's basically part of a company's retail system. When you come in, it talks to you. It essentially guides you along the way. It tells you these are the products, etc. And you can also use the robot to buy out. And the other one is essentially in Germany. It's standing in front of our Maker's Lab. So any new customer who comes in, this is the person this is the machine that greets him or her, and also gives a complete vision of what Maker's Lab is all about. So if you've got any questions about what products we're making, it's the robot that guides you. So the first facet of a receptionist, if you may call it.
One of our participants by the name of Paneer Chili, rather tempting in COVID times, I should say, when there's really not much food available around.
This is really good. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So he says, he or she says, could you shed some more light on the empathize part of courage? And he'd like to thank you. It's been one of the best sessions that, he or she has ever attended.
No, thank you. I would call him CP or PC or whatever as Paneer Chili, but I think the empathize part of courage I explained. I think the idea is you empathize with yourself first. A lot of times we are taught in the technology world and the services world that we live in is to empathize with your customer. And it's always there that when you design, make sure that this design helps the customer. When you make something and when you talk to the customer or anybody else, make sure that, you're talking in their language and you're understanding what they're saying. I think one of the important things that we miss out for innovation, at least, and for people who do a lot of work grounds up, is we miss out the empathy with us, the empathy that we carry for our own selves. And that is a big dampener for our morale. And I have seen people go out, they might be the best of the best, but they don't have empathy with themselves. The moment somebody else comes up and says, you are wrong, they start believing that they are wrong. And I think that's absolutely essential for an innovator, for a maker, for a person who wants to build something new, create something new, to have first an empathy for oneself. It should not be narcissism. It should not border on saying that I'm always right, but it should definitely carry an empathetic factor saying that whatever I'm doing will see the light of the day somehow in a very humble way. And when you do get down to dumps, which you normally do, life is a cycle and it's a sinusoidal curve. One way or the other, this empathy with yourself tends to push you out of that cycle. So you keep telling to yourself that you're good, you keep doing it. And that's the only part of empathizing within the courage facet.
Sure.
Hope I've answered the question.
Right. So few of our participants also would like you to, share a little bit more regarding basic science and how does it go along with it.
Yeah, so I think I think that's a very good question, and I think that's a quintessential part of AI today. I think what we have realized is ethics is a very broad subject, and what may be ethical for me may not be ethical for you, and each one of us has a definition for ethics. If we follow the world's definition of ethics, we are in a state where we are today. For example, a toy manufacturing company has the right to store data of anybody that it takes in, whether it's through vision or while talking, for more than 3 to 4 months, because it's a toy at the end of the day, and that's what the rules really play out. For another company like a telecom company, there's a big furrow when it essentially tries to store data, whether it's a healthcare data or people or your call records, etc. I think ethics is a very broad terminology. And so are different privacy and security rules across different worlds or across the world. India has some security and privacy rules. US would have something more. Europe would have it more stringently or less stringently, depending on the case itself. I think what we really need to do is, if we want to get ethics in machines, we have to have a binding document with us. Something which is an achar or a vichar document that tells us that this is how you should perform. And beyond this ruling, everything else is considered unethical. So we have two of them, of course, in the world. We have the UN People's Charter, which talks to us about what is ethical and how should we respond and react back and how should we talk to people. And then secondly, there is our Vedic science or the Vedas itself. Vedas have a large amount of sutras called Mimamsa Sutras or Brahma Sutras, which have given the way in which a human being should act in response to a society or in response to their own family and relationship. They can become the cornerstone and the bedstone for each ethical AI or a machine system as well. And that's where Vedas tie into ethics. And I don't believe our culture, our tradition, our country has gone through so many upheavals, ups and downs over the past, let's say 5,000 years, without having a bedrock for the culture. So that bedrock of the culture is what we want to bring into the machines and today's world. That's where ethics and Vedas come in.
Sure. Thank you. How do we go from ideation to MVP?
Yeah, so that's a good question, but it's also a question where we typically do design thinking. There are different phases where you essentially take from ideation to prototyping to a phase where you essentially test. I think from ideation to MVP, one of the best ways to take it is to essentially do it in a crowdsourced fashion. For first, the idea of ideation has to be clear, number one, and the ideation has to be taken in a broader spectrum of people who are conversant with the idea and who are willing to give up their thoughts as in an open forum to tell you what could go wrong. And that would also include an interspersing of these groups. It might be a group of people who are a little old to a group of people who might be a little young as we do it in Makers Lab. But that ideation essentially comes out with certain characteristics that the system may need. The next process is much more simpler, which is basically creating those ideas that we have gathered into some kind of user journeys and user flow, right? So, and those user flows will essentially define what your MVP is. Once you've gotten it done, the next week can be taken to essentially bring it down to an MVP level, which is group of coders, architects, maybe looking at security mechanisms. And so for me, it takes just 7 days from an idea to an MVP. Or if it's a very difficult subject or a difficult proposition, then from a week or 10 days, it essentially expands it to 2 weeks. And 2 weeks is the maximum that we take in Makers Lab to essentially bring out an idea into MVP. Of course, if it requires a lot of research, then there's a different proposition altogether. But from an idea to MVP, that is what we really do. Yeah.
Sure. How has been the work from home experience post the lockdown?
So I think it has increased for me at least. There are a lot of yeah, no, somebody has written a big question about it, and I think these are things that we are essentially trying to do. I think in Ayush Medical and some of the things, we are also working with the Arogya Setu team in order to enhance it. And I think the underlying bedrock of the Indian system is basically that's an Indian stack, which has got JAM, which has got Jan, Aadhaar, as well as Yojana and mobile. It's got Ayushman Bharat. It's got what do you call, e-challans, it's got UPI, it's got Bheem at the background. I think all of this data is available. I think the important thing to realize is, are we ethical in doing this? And what should be the moment? And that is what every architect is now looking at. How do you collect data, number one? But how do you also utilize some of our principles within the country to do research on, let's say, telemedicine? And there's a good question on telemedicine practices. We are essentially opening up telemedicine. The government is looking to open up telemedicine via Arogya Setu. Ayush practices are something which can be leveraged as well. So we are connected to some of the Ayurvedic doctors who are giving us those compounds to treat these proteins. We haven't found an answer, to be very honest, but we are looking to both allopathic drugs as well as Ayurvedic drugs to see how can we nullify it using a therapeutic drug or a grass agent. So so these are things that we are already doing. More than happy to share in a different forum or what is some of those principles that we are applying. Yeah.
Sure.
I think one of the questions Kaushik asked was, can you elaborate? Neuroscience can be integrated with AI. There are so many things, Kaushik. I think one of the things I told you is how do obfuscated vision work with machines. When machines are given images, we all know from a principle that convolutional neural net really works well. It breaks the image down into smaller components and pieces. So it finds edges, it finds faces, and then it reconstructs the entire image. What if the image is broken and that structure of broken image is not found? It is an obfuscated system. So that sector, we really need to pick up using, that's the first sector where neuroscience can come in. Why? I would have to delve into details in biology as well. What happens at the eye level and what happens at the retina level? What happens when a signal from a retina comes in at the center of the brain, which is the receptor locator? How does that signal transfer to the retina and the nerves over there? What are some of the recurrent loops that scientists have found out within the brain structure itself? And how can that be taken into AI? That's a bigger discussion. Yeah, somebody said we've got Atal Innovation Center set up. Absolutely. Incidentally, Atal Innovation Center is also set up within the MIT mold as well. And I am very well connected to that Atal Innovation Center, and we're working with them.
Can AI be used to boost the space race?
Exactly. I think that's another way in which AI is doing. I think there are companies who are essentially doing something called a space waste lab, where they're using a lot of AI. And this gentleman is also another maverick. He's basically looking at how can he look at the waste that is roaming around the surface of the Earth or the planet and point it down, because now we are essentially going towards the space waste mechanism. And all of this waste is essentially going to deter us when we put in more people in space, when we look at more flights and more satellites, etc. That's one way in which space race is being looked at. The second race is young kids. I think there was a 6-year-old, my friend's kid, who came to me and he says, "Uncle, we want to do asteroid mining." Honestly, I had no clue what asteroid mining was. I and my friend had to go back and read, let's say, for about 2 days, saying what asteroid mining really means. And we came back to him and we asked him a question: what does he really want to do? And he said, "Hey, why can't we essentially send robots, train them with AI, get them onto an asteroid which is passing close to the surface, let them collect some information from that asteroid or the metals, and then come back to Earth's surface. You've got a rare metal on the Earth." We thought that was brilliant. And I think those are areas where AI would really help in advancing the space race as well.
Sure. There's a question on agrotech, if you've been able to answer that. How best can AI ML empower the agrotech industry, the crop protection?
It's already, to a certain extent, it's already empowering it. We are connected to a lot of agriculture scientists also, and agrotech and agri-tech is basically a forum in which we are doing. It's a smaller bet, although in Makers Lab, but it is a bet nonetheless. I think finding out patterns and understanding what yields are, and I think we've got to understand that. And please don't take it as blasphemy, but you can go and check some of the facts with agriculture scientists. I think one of the biggest problems that have happened to agriculture today in India is, number one, the agriculture practices are too old. Farmers today are using practices which were used probably 70, 80 years back. And it's not the problem with farmers. It's basically the problems for mechanization. Mechanization has essentially introduced that concept where per tonnage or the yield per tonnage has to increase. And as a result of that, we are putting fertilizers, we're putting all sorts of, etc. And we're making sure that these crops really grow faster and they grow better so that they can be given into the market. That's number one problem. Number two problem is our farmers, our soil is become totally parched. And I'll give you one idea. Please see how the power of every tractor is growing every single day. You know why? Because it's so difficult to till the land. And the land is completely parched. If you look at land which are fertile, you would find earthworms, you will find loads of other materials which are helping the land take nitrogen. That land has been lost, number one. Number two. Number three, and this is basically what we have discussed with farmers and with agriculture scientists. Farmers still face a problem safeguarding their fields. For some of the farmers, the fields are very close to forest. And these forest animals tend to come in and destroy their property, crop, as well as, what else. Farmers are very, very innovative. They have tried almost all mechanisms. They have those small little hooplas running around with making sounds. They have scarecrows. Of course, scarecrows are a thing of a past. They've even found out crackers, and they have made a system so that crackers burst every 4 or 5 minutes. But then we are dealing with a biological life. And the biological life has an adaptation and has survival of the fittest. So animals still find a way to essentially enter the ground and destroy the crop. These are all problems that I'm telling you, which cannot be solved unless data is converted into a computation, and computation given some analysis to essentially help the farmer. So these are all cases where AI can help.
Sure. Thanks, Nikhil. Do we have your permission to extend it for a couple of more minutes? Because there are many questions still coming in.
Sure.
Sure. So there was one such question, which of course mentioned that, given that the webinar is about emerging technologies and innovations, would you endorse Elon Musk and his innovations?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think Elon Musk is doing a fantastic job. I think, but I think I don't endorse the fear. I endorse whatever. I think I think I've had a chance of listening to him from very close quarters in one of these, one of the forums that I attended. But I think his point is right. I think at some point in time, the human facet is to leap forward. And that human facet can happen in two ways. Number one, when we start utilizing energy very efficiently. And that has been the crux of every species and every growth of every species. When you do autonomous driving, you are essentially utilizing energy effectively, even though this is energy which is created from electric power. And that is an abundant nature. The second facet is, where can you find more value in creating some life? And that is basically being extraterrestrial. We human beings, unless we sit on this planet Earth, we won't be able to expand and see new horizons. We have to get out. And we have to be more extraterrestrial and look at the space frontier as well. And so in both those cases, whatever Elon is doing is fantastic. And this is absolutely required and needed. And he's being a kind of messiah who's essentially leading it from the front. What I don't really sometimes like, or what I don't agree with, is some of the fears that people are essentially saying that AI would rule over humanity. They would come in and they would destroy everything. I don't think that we are at that stage, and we have the power to do that. We have the power to control all of that facet as well. And one of the simple ways of looking at it is, when you look at neuroscience and when you try and put some of those neuroscience elements into machines, there is no way that you can create sentience, number one. There is no way we can replicate souls. There is no way that a human life can be created. We are only taking some elements of mathematical calculation. And why do we want to go towards cortex? And why did I show the cortex? Because the cortex or the neocortex is only the portion which is responsible for your intelligence. There is another portion of the brain, which is very, very reptilian, which is the back of the brain, which is called medulla oblongata. All the flight and fright response that you do in your life is essentially because of that small little component of medulla oblongata. And if we are not computing that part, that is the essence of what humans react back is implicitly defined into it. What we are only defining is the seat of intelligence, which is basically the neocortex. So I don't think machines are going to overpower. Even if they are, we have probably about 100, 200 years to do that. But I think humanity would check out itself. One of the biggest examples that I can give you is how nature has responded back with this COVID virus. I think you see now that the world's a much more healthier and a breathable space and that's a forced effect from nature, I think there will be a balancing act always. So I'm not worried about those cases.
Sure. Where do we draw the line between what is it that the user wants over what feature can be a value add for the user? Again, here's the example of Steve Jobs.
I think you draw a line based on constant feedbacks from the user. I think one of the biggest examples that Apple has done and what Steve Jobs have managed to do is to implant a use case within a user's mind, which was not possible and was not there. And, there's a lot of talk in sectors where people say, technology to enabler hota hai, it is the businessman or the business idea that makes in. I believe that in today's world, it is technology that is creating those business sectors. Ola would have not happened and Uber would have not happened had technology not been there. And the simple reason for that is that you don't own a car, you don't own a fleet of drivers, but you're still running the biggest car and taxi company in the world digitally or via software. I think that was the effect what Steve Jobs did with the Apple iPhone. He implanted a feature set and he implanted a kind of mechanism with a user, which was not seen before. Even though the first iPhone, I don't know how many of you would have seen iPhone 2G or 3G, but I happened to get it and it was pathetic. The feel of the phone was great. It worked very well for whatever it was. When you wanted to update, there was a whole conundrum behind the scenes to update it. I think from that point onwards to today, iPhone certainly changed a lot of lives and also a lot of industries as well. So I think, again, it's a balance. But you draw the line when the customer wants to draw the line for a design.
Sure. So is Tech Mahindra again getting back to work 20th April onwards? Not that I'm not sure. Working from home.
That I'm not sure. I think we'll be working from home for the moment in Pune. I'm not sure about that.
Sure. So I'd like to, let the participants know that for more questions, do reach out to me offline on LinkedIn. And we'll go ahead and conclude the webinar here. Special thanks to our guest speaker, Mr. Nikhil Malhotra, for his time and sharing such wonderful, valuable insights. And a round of thanks to our participants for joining us today.
Thank you, guys. Stay safe, stay at home, and stay away from travel. Thank you so much, Priya. Thank you.
Sure. I'd like to invite you all to our next webinar. Save the date, 24th April, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Friday. Our guest speaker is Mr. T.N. Hari of Big Basket, who will talk about essentials for billions and how did Big Basket innovate. So please register soon for this webinar. Limited seats are available. For those who tuned in late, this curated series on innovations will feature a variety of industry thought leaders, speakers like Nikhil, who are a part of the MIT ID innovation ecosystem. MIT stands for the 4-decade-old Maharashtra Institute of Technology. ID stands for MIT's 15-year-old Institute of Design. And the one-year innovation program is the latest offering of MIT ID, which aims to create a new breed of comprehensive innovators, informed by design thinking, influenced by future technologies and trends, and inspired to make their own mark in the global scenario, be it political, social, economic, and technological. All our social channel links have been shared in the chat above. Do reach out to us. And yes, stay connected, stay safe, and keep innovating every day. Thank you once again, Nikhil.
Most welcome, Priya. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys. Yeah, stay safe.
Yeah, take care. Thank you so much.